Okay, so anyway, as YouTube tunes in, we're already on picture. So here we are on the 11th of December. Hope everybody's doing well. Um, it is, yeah, I have to warm up the vacuum tubes exactly. Give me that rich tone that you get out of vacuum tubes. Um, yeah, so I had a wonderful time last night with Natasha for her art show. She had her first public viewing at an art gallery last night. It was kind of a big party, and she was just crazy over the moon about the whole thing, and I was too. I was just so proud of her. So that was fun. Looking forward to getting her started in 2024. She's been having a bit of a tough time getting photography work out here because it's so different in Moscow. There's just lots and lots of demand for really high glamour photography, just really high end stuff. And Los Angeles is not exactly the maybe the pop culture center of the universe. It used to be, but in any event, it's not exactly where you would go for top glamour elegance. But she really is the brand. I mean, she's just incredible photographer. She's a great artist, becoming better. She does some musical instruments. She's just fantastic. So starting in 2024, we're going to start getting her out there kind of as a brand, and I'm looking forward very much to seeing how well she does, because I just think she's just terrific. We had a really good time last night. And she drives, yes. She drives through LA, which is wonderful. So that was fun last night. I got an email from the Daily Wire people about the Frank Luke script. Last I talked to them was before I did the new website, so what was that, 7 or 8 years ago, I guess. Been working on that ever since then. They said basically that they were in Europe for the Pendragon cycle for until January. So I just said, well, I'll have that script for you on January 2nd when you guys show up to work. So that'll be fun because it's more or less done. Get that Frank Luke thing in the works and then move on. But the main thing for me right now is just kind of on my mind all the time is I just have to get some content out. We have still got a few issues on the website. So here's the issue. Really, we can solve everything pretty quickly. There are in WordPress there are two different. There's a lot going on in WordPress. There's a subset of WordPress called Elementor, and there's various templates that you can use. And I'd come up with a post template that I like very much. This is what I want a post to look like. I wanted to have a title on the front, featured image here, then a little first text box, then the embedded video, and then here's how you listen to it on SoundCloud, and then the comments. And off to the side, I wanted to have the latest posts, and we got all that going. And then somehow that post template got saved as a page template. And then that screwed up the pages. So I've got the post template back where I wanted to. As soon as we're done with the show here, I'm going to do the page template. And then everything should just fall into place, because it also happens retroactively. It just goes back and reformats everything as it comes up. So I just need to get this damn thing over with. We did hire the guy who did all the technical stuff and the migration from the old site to the new site. So he's on a monthly kind of retainer to make sure that all the updates stay current, that we don't get ourselves into anything that starts slowing the site down, and be available on, I wouldn't exactly say 24-hour call, but it depends on what time the call comes in, because in any event, he's on the other side of the world. I get to see him, speak to him twice a day. But in any event, we'll get it there fast. So main thing to do now is just start getting out some of this new content. Obviously, most of that's going to break in 2024 just because things have run so long, but I would very much like to get John Voight done before Christmas. Our good friend Clay is coming up on Wednesday. He's going to help me hang the banners and the rest of the stuff to get the story mechanics set up. And then I mentioned on the Stratosphere Lounge show that last Thursday I did a live speaking event where I covered virtually everything in, at least on the foundational level, of things to come. So Those things are going to be pre-scripted. I'm going to keep them nice and small and bite-sized little pieces. We're just going to boom, 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 this. We've had a problem, which I was not even aware of, is just complete oversight on my part, and that is that people have been doing blog posts on the new site, and the blog posts are being accepted, but just like a complete idiot, I didn't set up a blog post page for them to be displayed. So that's the first thing I'm going to do when I get done tonight, and I know I'm moist and I need to keep it short. Sometimes I say I'm going to keep it short, and I do 3 hours, but tonight I'm going to have to keep it short. I just don't like canceling as often as I have been with all this workload and stuff. But I will put up a blog post, a blog page for all of our blog posts to show up there, and I apologize for that because I know a number of people have made blogs. And the final thing to do is I'm going to hire somebody to migrate the stuff over that's in the gap. So the last 3 or 4 weeks, at least maybe 5 weeks prior to when we made the switch, we'll move that stuff over to the new site, get the forum back up, and we're practically there. But in any event, I'm not having to double post now. I don't have to post to the new site and the old site. I was doing that for 3 weeks. And just little things like posting on the new site are just so much faster just because the website is just so much faster. The new server is great. The new code is great. We moved the old site to the new servers. It's marginally faster. It's still crazy slow, but it's better. One of the things that has been holding me up a little bit is I did a button link from Archives Island to the old site, and I just thought the buttons were ugly. So I'll probably just do a quick little mini thumbnail so each show can be identified. I mean, it's just a little button. It's a virtue signal and stuff. I'll just use the artwork that we used and make make that page look just a little bit better. But in any event, that's how that's going to go. Eric says he's perfectly fine with the 3-hour bill show so long as there's Q&A involved. So obviously that's going to be as usual my top priority, and that's making sure that Eric Blake is 100% satisfied with the show, and all the rest of you can go pounce it. But having done what I did on Friday night, Thursday night, brought in a bunch of biology to this stuff, and that's good because now I can break this things to come thing into more pieces. Not only I'm going to be adding the members blog page, which I have to add. I'm also hoping tonight to add a speaking engagements page because I've got. Well, I'll do that as soon as I get this one that I shot on Thursday. But I've got a bunch of live speeches that didn't have a place really to live. So, and there's more coming. I have any number on my iPhone of 1-hour events over the years that I just didn't post anywhere. So those are fun if you got, if you're a medically induced coma or you otherwise have problem sleeping. And then I also want to add a virtual presidency page because I'm going to start plugging those things in. And and I need a firewall afterburner page as well because I got to bring back some of those things. Now, I got one comment. I got a number of comments from a number of different people in the beta testers. And one of them was, and I've been giving this some thought. For those of you familiar with the website, the whole first page is the opening screen is just a picture carousel. I think it's like 54 images, and got 1 or 2 suggestions saying that's great, but once you've seen the 54 images, you don't really need it. Can you have a switch to turn that off? And I'm thinking, well, you can just scroll down past it. What I definitely do need to do, however, is right below the image carousel page, and before you get to the individual listings for right angle and all the rest of it, is I need to have a repeat of these buttons to just rapidly get you to where you want to go. It's in the pull-down menu, but I'll use these same kind of little mini picture thumbnails so you don't have to scroll your way to China, Not that there's anything wrong with that. So we'll streamline all that stuff. But overall, I'm just very, 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 very happy with it. I'm just so much happier with it than what we had before. Like I said, hopefully Clay will be up on Wednesday. I've got the Opal camera set up over there. As I mentioned, I think before, not only do I have to build this background, but I'm going to have to spend 7 or 8 hours in makeup because, man, that that 4K camera is brutal. But there's a whole space here that we haven't used, and I'm really looking forward to it. I think my BillWhittle.com little neon signature thing should be here in the not too distant future, so that'll go up. That'll be cool. And I'd like to catch John before Christmas. If not, we'll get him right after. But so just to give you guys an update on the overall output situation, the website is within range of being done. I've got probably 4 or 5 hours worth of work to get that where I need it to be done. Story mechanics, we have all the elements we need for the first 2 shows. We've got the gift for John. We've got the gift for Gary. We have to basically build that out, but that shouldn't take too long, and that'll grow over time. I've got all of these different segments of things to come, which is kind of my signature political piece for the year in real good shape now. And so those will be written. I will have to have the first draft of the Frank Luke thing finished by January 2nd. So I've been working on that on and off for nearly a year. There will be 2 rewrites after that, but those are relatively straightforward in terms of time and effort. So I'm going to have a busy couple of weeks, but I've always liked working over the holidays, and I always thought that week between Christmas and New Year's was just almost like free time where, nobody's really expecting a whole lot out of you there. We'll keep doing our right angles, obviously, but maybe give me a chance to catch up a little bit. Taffy 3 update for Sad Wings? No, but I will say this, Sad Wings, every day that goes by, I become more and more convinced that is something that I will not give up to other people. That is I happen to think of all the things that are on the table and colonies and all the rest of it. I actually happen to think that crowdfunding the money to do the Taffy 3 thing will probably be the easiest thing to crowdfund, because you not only get the political stuff and the conservative stuff, but you also get the whole Navy thing. There's just I think you could subscribe this just out of naval personnel, both active duty and former, and not to mention naval history buffs. And that movie is not a terribly expensive movie to make. In fact, it's probably, without question, it's simpler than the Frank Luke story, simply because there's fewer locations, and so much of it is CG. I'd mentioned before that the Frank Luke story, Daily Wire secured the rights from a book called The Stand by a guy named Stephen Slater, who really just turned this whole thing into a tremendous detective story. And he contacted me yesterday also and said, aside from, hey, how are things going? He said, what airplanes, World War I airplanes, would you like to be able to have, like real ones? Well, by happy coincidence, on the Frank Luke story, the SPAD 13 was my favorite fighter of the war. I just thought it was a beast. I just loved it. So there are still a number of flying World War I replicas that Stephen is part of the community of, and gets some of them. I'd like to get since he asked me, I said, well, the ones that we have physical contact in, where I have to get an actor getting into the aircraft, would certainly be the SPAD 13, the Newport 28s, because they were the planes that they were flying before before Luke's squadron got the SPADs. There's a training Newport that I think they called the 21 meter. It was prior to the Newport 28 and after the early Newport. Was it the 14 or the 12? I can't remember now. 16 maybe. We have to have a flying Jenny for the training. So those would be the ones that Luke actually would have had a chance to fly. And then I'd also got enough action with the Fokker D7 to at least be able to have a Fokker D7. I've forgotten the name of the observation plane that Luke shot down the day that those 2 pictures of him were taken. But that particular fight is something that's got a lot of screen time in it. But to be honest with you, as I told him, we won't get enough SPADs to be able to fly for any kind of formation. And what I think probably the greatest benefit of having the flyable aircraft will be to take them up on aerial photography missions over appropriate terrain, and use those flights as photo references for the CG, and get fly real planes over real territory, and then use that as your standard to get your visual effects up where they want them. I told Steve from the beginning, I just sent him an email not too long before we started the show, that I will fight tooth and nail, and I'll, if I plead with Daily Wire on this and they say no, we're going to do it this way, then I'll go directly to the Communist Party military chiefs, just like that great patriot General Telly, or whatever his name is, did. But I will fight to the death to keep out of that absurd CG where the camera flies through the struts of the airplane, that BS shake they give it. One thing that's nice is I was explaining this to Stephen. When it comes time to record the aerial footage in Unreal, you would set up, the dogfight would have to be pre-rendered. I mean, it wouldn't be like shooting a machinima from DCS. But once you had the actual action in place, what you can do in Unreal Engine is you can have an Unreal Engine set, and they do this all the time on Mandalorian, and then you can have a director of photography who's looking through this thing, and he's seeing the virtual world through this camera, including things like focus pulls and all the rest of it. So you get extremely accurate looking handheld camera footage through a game engine like Unreal, or through Blender or whatever. And what that means is, let me preface this story by one other story that's really quick. I got to know a friend of mine named Joel, who was in the Avatar movies. He played the nerdy scientist guy. So one of the guys actually had an avatar. When they were doing Avatar the first time, shortly after I got to know him, he was down there in New Zealand or wherever for a long time, and that on a couple of occasions they were all ready to go. They had a call for the next morning, so he's a physical actor, and he'd go to these incredible sets that they built for Avatar. And Joel said on a couple of occasions that they got a cancellation at the last minute because Jim Cameron was busy on location. And what that meant was that the CG artist who had created the Pandora world had done it procedurally, and since all of this stuff was essentially done through computer procedures, nobody really knew what they were going to get. They knew that the biomes and everything looked good. So what being on location, when Cameron said he was on location, what that meant was he was wearing virtual reality goggles and going to these various locations that his 3D people had thought were interesting, and he was just kind of looking around. He also had a camera, that he could use and do all this other stuff with the background. So Cameron was on location in his CG universe, checking out locations, and once they found something they liked, obviously, then they could just hand add all kinds of cool things to it. But I just thought that was really neat. So once we get if we were to get a dogfight scene, for example, and render that just render it so that all the planes are moving where they're supposed to move, then in the middle of this you could take a virtual aircraft, for example. I could fly a virtual aircraft with VR goggles through that dogfight, and then a cameraman in the back of the plane or in the front of the plane could be doing handheld footage as it occurs to him, so that all of these camera pan things would be like super natural, like you were really, really there. And the main thing of it is it would automatically prevent you from doing these BS CG camera angle. You've seen these things 1,000 times. You'll see them diving on a balloon or whatever, and you're looking down at the balloon, and one plane goes shoom, one goes shoom, one goes shoom, one shoom like that. It's like, no, no. So the entire idea would be, we should be able to do this so that we would shoot CG aircraft as if they were being shot from another aircraft, the way they did for Battle of Britain or anything else that looks realistic. I saw something on YouTube that was saying, was talking about Maverick, but just talking in general. And this is just my entire motto, ethos, is like, a movie that has no CG means a movie that does not have any noticeable CG. You can't tell it's CG. That's what was so great about Maverick. They did practical stuff wherever they could, and when they didn't do practical stuff, like the F-18s going through the valley, they didn't have this CG camera flying along off the wing. They put the CG camera on the side of the CG mountain, and you see these Hornets come by, and it looked like it was a real camera filming real airplanes. This is really, really important to me. Really important to me. We'll get that done. Anyway, so as we roll out of 2023, as we record this, we got 20 days left. In 2024, we're going to come out of the gate with new content for all this stuff. The first thing I have to do with Major Mace Mattingly is I have to take that existing interview, which I'm pretty happy with, and move the guys off of that TV set that they're on, put them inside the moon-based control room, keep all the same facial action and the facial expressions. I like that a lot. I thought those worked well. So I wouldn't change the performances, but I would get them out of this TV studio that doesn't really exist, and I just put them in their, in their work jumpsuits, have them just kind of sit around in there and doing the interview that way. And then I would do the reversal of the interviewer, and I'd put some TV cameras in that shot and make it look like a TV set. So just get that buffed up, because that's 80% done. And then I'm just going to start doing the first of the teaser commercials with the the Dylan Mulvaney thing, and the guy saying that's what happens. Let boys play with toy guns and all the rest of it. So I got a lot of stuff to start getting out after all these promises and all of these things and websites and all that jazz. But the main thing is that and starting the story mechanics, so we can actually have some members-only content that's just for members, and we'll see what that does for our membership numbers. So that's about it. Yeah, like the mock loop, exactly right. Steve Loop said the for those who are not familiar with it, the mock loop is it's a low-level training area. I want to say it's in Wales. Virtually positive it's in Wales. And this is where USAF and RAF fighters come to practice their low-level penetration techniques. Doesn't seem particularly long. It looks like maybe they've got 3 or 4 minutes of flying time total. But this particular area is remote enough so that, and this hilly enough so that these F-15s or F-35s or whatever you happen to have that day. I've seen C-130s in there. I've seen B-1s in there. These guys basically have to do this contour flying below the mountains, and since they're below the hills, professional photographers and videographers get up there on those training days, and they get pictures of these jets, from 100 to 150 yards away, 200 yards away. And the mock loop footage is available on YouTube, and something I should add to Ephemera because it's great. Speaking of something that has absolutely nothing to do with anything, Bert Rutan showed me something about this, and it was done in California. For those of you who've ever been into this lovely Los Angeles city, the entire look at it. If you look at LA from the Pacific Ocean, like you're flying in from the Pacific, you've got the Santa Monica Mountains off to your left. You go nothing but beach all the way down to, at least the Orange County border. And then you've got a series of mountains that basically end up channeling at El Cajon Pass. That's where all of the windmills are. And so you've got 20 or 30 miles of coastline with onshore breezes that eventually funnel itself into this Venturi, little very tightly compressed spot with high mountains on both sides. Wind blows through there. That's why they put the first windmill farms up there. So it's constantly blowing in there, and sometimes it's blowing really hard. I think I mentioned a couple times I was flying the other direction in the Sky Arrow that generally cruises at about 115 knots, and it's about 125 miles an hour, and I was flying into a 70 or 80 mile an hour headwind, and my ground speed was, I was watching freeway cars passing me just all the time. It was like being in a hot air balloon. But because the wind in there can be so constant and so powerful, Bert told me about this. I've never seen anything about it, never heard about it. But on one of these ridges, when you have a steady wind hitting a slope, that air has to go somewhere, and so it goes up, and this is called ridge lift. And if you've got a glider close enough to that slope, as that air is forced upward by the air behind it, anything in that air column will go up, including gliders. And Bert said that there are guys on that ridge who had remote control gliders. I still can't believe this. I've seen the footage. It's just amazing. And because there's that constant, steady source of energy, these guys were able to take I'm a glider with a wingspan as tall as I am, if not more, heavy too. Launch these things off of this cliff, do a turn, and use the lift coming off of it, and then just keep doing this. Slope soaring, Steve says, yeah. But these RC gliders will reach speeds of 400 miles an hour. And they will be basically doing loops so fast. I forget what somebody said the G load on them is, but it's something like 60 or 70 Gs. It's something incredible. And eventually all you see, because they have to just kind of pull themselves into it, then the guy on the remote control just pulling it tighter and tighter, tighter. And eventually it's like, it's invisible. And I was just like, are you kidding me? Yeah, 400 miles an hour and 60 G turn or something like that. It was pretty impressible as well as impressive. So anyway, all that stuff's just all kind of related. So got the holidays coming up. I'd like to get John Voight done before Christmas, and I'd like to get the first of the virtue signal. The things to come things out. But in any event, I'm practically done with the website, so that's something. And I will have to be done with the Frank Luke thing by January 1st, so I got 3 weeks to finish that up. They just do loops, Steve. You could sailplane a glider or fly a glider, remote control or piloted, using ridge lift for hundreds of miles. When I was working at Crystal Soaring, I was working as a line boss in order to get free flying lessons out there in the 117-degree Mojave summers. We would have guys that would, called the Crystal Squadron at the time, there'd be, 15, 20 guys, had their own high-performance gliders. They'd pull them in trailers, or they'd keep the trailers there, and then during the summertime, they just crank these things out and get them set up by 9 or 10, and then they just sit and wait until the lift developed. But once the first thermal started going, then everybody wanted to get out of there because they were all trying to do distance records. We had guys flying from Palmdale easily to Vegas to New Mexico. These guys doing 300, 400 mile long flights. I believe there's a place in Hawaii where they set an endurance record in a sailplane for something like 40 hours of flying, just nonstop. As long as you've got that onshore breeze and you've got a hill, you're in great shape. When usually the winds in Southern California come in from the north, those would be the Santa Ana winds. And when we were in the Mojave Desert, we were north of the San Gabriel Mountains, which separates Los Angeles from Mojave. And so virtually all of the time that I would be flying and the ridge lift was available, it'd be winds coming in from the north. I'm on the north side of the ridge. That air goes up, so I'm riding ridge lift on the north side of the ridge. But every now and then, winds would reverse and they'd be coming in from the the southwest. It'd be onshore breeze. And when that wind was strong enough, it would create mountain wave, which is where the wind goes up, forms like a lenticular cloud, those flying saucer-like clouds, lenticular clouds. It's where moist air is down low and warm, and as it gets forced up by the mountains, it condenses, and as that flow comes back down again, it re-evaporates. And the thing about it's called mountain wave. The thing about mountain wave is, I don't know this to be true, but the only time I've ever seen anybody try to get in mountain wave was on the lee side of the mountain. And so you look up there and you see these lenticular clouds, and you take a toe up to the base of these things, and you let go, and then you start flying towards this range, this mountain, where this really powerful lift is. And unfortunately, before you get into the smooth air of the wave, that air is coming over the mountain, and as it comes over the mountain on the other side, it forms rotor. It just goes completely turbulent on the other side. And so getting into mountain wave, you take a toe up to the base of the rotor, you let go, you're flying along, it's a little bit bumpy and stuff. And then you hit the rotor, and it's just like, you just feel like the plane just hit a like a concrete wall. It's like boom, you just like boom, like just really just knock your head up into the canopy. You got to be really strapped in, or else you just boom, boom. It's like, holy cow, what the hell are we doing here? We fought this thing for long enough, and I thought, this is insane. Why are we even trying this? And then once I was flying with the flight instructor, obviously with Jeff Larkin, and once we got through the rotor and got a little bit of altitude, it's like magic. You get out of that rotor, and that air it's laminar flow air. It's a perfect coherent stream of air. It's almost like laser air. And once you get out of the turbulence of this thing coming over the hill, this air on lenticular waves, this mountain wave air, is like glass. So you go from getting the living crap beat out of you to not even thinking you're flying. It just like stops, and you're looking at your variometer, and your vertical speed just gets pegged. Just going straight up like that. It's just phenomenal. It's like I really was like, why are we going through this? We're getting the crap beat out of us. I was really worried the plane would hold together. And he said, just wait. We got into that, hit that wave, and then it's just magic. It's just and up you go. It's pretty cool. Oh, that's cool. Steve Whoop says he's been there at 14K. That's very impressive, Steve, because as you know, and I know, not many other people know, 14K is the limit. You are legal limit anyway. You are, in general aviation, you are required to use oxygen above 14,000 feet and above 12,500 feet if you're going to be up there for more than a half an hour. One of the early pioneers of sailplanes was a guy named Paul McCready, who I'm pretty sure it was McCready who built the first man-powered airplane. Was it the Gossamer Albatross? The Gossamer. He was the guy who first. I'm pretty sure it was the same guy. In any event, McCready got into mountain wave, and he had oxygen, because if he hadn't, he'd be dead. But he didn't have a pressure suit, and so McCready took a glider with no engine up to something like 65,000 feet, which is twice the height of a commercial jetliner. And he was able to breathe okay, but the thing, Gossamer Condor, Gossamer Albatross, one of those two was first. Anyway, McCready did this incredible thing, I guess because he was McReady, and he got up to some insane height, and he had a pressure mask like you'd see a fighter pilot on. At that altitude, you can't just have the cannulas, or just have you just can't have just like bleed oxygen. You got to pressurized oxygen. So he took care of that, but McCready got up to 65,000 feet, and he was up there long enough that his the air pressure around him was so low in the cabin, this is not pressurized cabin, that all of the capillaries in his surface of his skin started to rupture because the external pressure was getting pretty close to a vacuum. So he's breathing okay, but his skin is starting to boil, essentially. And I remember, I never talked to him about it, never met him, but I remember reading that he said that once he started coming down, he said it was like there were like millions of maggots in his skin crawling around, and that it hurt like hell. And I thought, I'm not particularly keen on going to 65,000 feet in a sailplane, but I'm glad guys like Paul McCready did, because that's a ballsy thing to do, man. A very, very, very cool thing to do. Okay, so anyway, let's go do a couple quick questions, and then I will get on with it. And I think Natasha will be coming over later. And like the bends, this is the opposite of. Let me think about this. It's not exactly like the bends. One of the things about the scuba divers will tell you that you should not scuba dive ideally on the same day that you take an airplane ride, but certainly not shortly after you take an airplane ride. And the reason for that is that an aircraft cabin is pressurized to about 8,000 feet. So they don't, when you get on an airplane, you're going up to where the air is unbreathably thin, but they don't take sea level pressure up there. There'd just be too much of a differential between the inside and the outside of the airplane. It's not necessary. So generally, the inside of the airplane on every commercial flight you've ever been on is generally, the air is about as thick as it is at about 8,000 feet. It's higher than Denver. So the air is thinner on an airplane, commercial airplane. My sister has some serious lung problems, and she has problems on airplanes. But because you're at lower pressure in an airplane, let me think about how this works. So as you increase the pressure, the nitrogen in the air goes in, becomes liquid. It gets into the bloodstream, and it's the releasing of the pressure when you come back up, when the pressure lessens, that as you come up as a scuba diver, the air that you breathe down at 200 feet, let's say, or 60 feet for that matter, the air you breathe, because you're breathing air and not oxygen, you breathe air at 60 feet, 70 feet, the outside pressure is strong enough for that nitrogen to go directly into the bloodstream. And then as you come up and the pressure releases, those bubbles begin to form because it goes from liquid to gas in your blood vessels. And when those bubbles get caught in your joints, which is where they tend to get concentrated, your joints just freeze up, and you just everything just clenches, and you just bend over, which is why they call it the bends. And if you have spent time on an airplane prior to that, you've already spent a fair amount of time at 8,000 feet, which means that I guess it means there's more room to pack. I don't know what it means. I just know it's more of a contrast is what I know. Okay, so anyway, let's do a few questions so that Eric doesn't come after me with his hat, because nobody wants that. That just nobody wants that. And then kind of keep this short if I can. I'll get going, get some more work done on this website, and get this ball moving here. Yeah, let's go to thebuilder.com and we'll check the website. Hey, look at that! It loaded right up, and I go to the forums. By the way, the drop-down menu's behind the titles. I don't know how that happened. On one of the many things to fix. Forum. Hey, look at that! That thing loaded in less time than we'd still be having, blog. Stratopop questions for 1211. Thank you, Eric. I got to get that forum together more. So anyway, maybe I can talk with you about that later, Eric, or something. Almost done. Anyway, with this thing. So I got one from Jacob Belcher, got one from Road Rider, Chris Taylor, Eric Blake, Broke College student, Steve Young, and George Freeland. We'll get through all of those if I have to. I don't think I'll do the doubles, but I'll get through at least one of them. All right, here we go. So Jacob Belcheck. Hi, Bill. Hey, Jacob. Last week you followed a tangent of astronomy and cosmology that ended as a case for intelligent design for the Earth. It ended, to be precise, it ended with what I consider to be more compelling evidence for the likelihood of a creator relative to mechanistic processes than I had before thought, but you're correct. Yes. During that tangent, you suggested that one of the reasons that this idea faces so much resistance from the scientific community is that human beings intrinsically reject the idea that there are things that we're not capable of knowing. Yes, if there is a God, then there are things that scientists cannot have access to. Not don't have access to, but cannot and will never have access to. Have you considered that there may be a moral or spiritual purpose for this? For instance, the steady state theory was the pet theory of the early 20th century, in the words of its proponents, specifically because it was far away from the text of Genesis as they could get. Some are on record specifically resisting the Big Bang because it sounded entirely too much in the beginning. God created in the beginning. Let there be light. It's not an intellectual proposition. Coming to an intelligent design proposition has significant implication. Design means designer. Designer means purpose. Purpose means responsibility. Responsibility means judgment. What say you? What say me is I had not considered that, but that's profound as usual. By the time I really started getting deeply into astronomy, and when I was 13, this 73, 74, the Big Bang Theory was well on its way to being accepted. But even as early as 10, 15, 20 years before that, there was some significant controversy. Everybody knows what the Big Bang Theory is. For those of you not up on your astronomical history, and shame on you, the prevailing theory prior to the Big Bang was what was called the steady state theory. We learned from Hubble in the 1920s, I want to say, at the observatory that is overlooking Los Angeles, overlooking Pasadena. He could tell that the entire universe was expanding based on the redshift. So stars and galaxies, which are made up of billions of stars, emit light. So far, so shocking, huh? But here's what's interesting about the light. There are chemicals that put dark. So if you imagine a spectrum, certain chemicals will absorb light at certain frequencies, and what that means is if you look at a spectrum of a star or a galaxy or something, you'll see a spectrum and you'll see these dark lines where certain well-known chemicals, hydrogen, helium, whatever, are absorbing that particular frequency, wavelength, right? Great. What Hubble figured out was that as something was, the further away something was, the more those lines were shifted towards the red, and the only explanation for that was the relativistic explanation of this thing moving away from us. This is the red shift, and it's also a form of the Doppler effect. Things are shifted to the higher frequencies when it's coming towards you, and lower frequencies when it's going away from you. The sound of the train doesn't change; it's just based on your perception, or on a razor. That's all Doppler shift. Cars making the same noise. Sound waves are compressed on the way in, and they're expanded on the way out. So Hubble discovered that everything was moving away from us because these dark absorption lines were being shifted towards the red. And not only were they moving away from us, the further away they were, the faster they were moving away from us. And so that meant that the universe is expanding, and it also meant that it's expanding in such a way. You would think that if the universe were expanding and we weren't, you would think that if the universe were expanding, the only place where everything would be redshifted would be the center of the universe. And that's what we were seeing. Now, we know we're not the center of the universe. And the only other way to explain this is that everything is expanding away from everything else. So the only way I've ever, certainly the go-to example of this is, if you blow up a balloon this big and you put a bunch of dots on the surface and you continue to blow up the balloon, all of those dots expand away from each other. And that's what we're seeing. That's what the evidence is showing us conclusively. So this was a problem. And so the first theory for this was called the steady state theory. And the idea was that there was, in fact, a center of the universe, and that matter was just being constantly created there by reasons that we couldn't explain. And this matter was just basically just constantly pushing the universe out. And the question was, okay, so we're pushing matter out. The more matter we add to the universe, the more gravity there's going to be. The more gravity there's going to be, the more it's going to want to slow this expansion, because the gravity's going to want to pull everything back in together again. And then they figured out ways to basically run this clock backwards, all this expansion we see, and then, well, what happens if we just reverse time and we see this contraction? And that led to the Big Bang Theory, which is that at one point changes not terribly significantly for quite a long time, 13, 14 billion years ago. Everything in the universe was an infinitely small, infinitely dense, infinitely hot point. You can ask how big was the point, but it didn't have dimensions. It was a event horizon. It was a singularity, rather. It had no physical dimensions. It was everything that there is in an infinitely dense, infinitely hot, infinitely small space. And my friend Jim said, yeah, that's what I've heard. That's what you've heard too, Bill. You've heard it your whole life. But just think about that for a second. Think about the likelihood of that. And furthermore, if this thing was infinitely small, infinitely dense, and infinitely hot, then why did it go bang? In other words, what was holding it together prior to the Big Bang? And then you start getting into the horsepower issue of the brain, where we cannot really, there's no way for us to not think about before and after. I mean, one explanation is that nothing changed. It was infinitely hot. It was infinitely dense, and it was infinitely small. And that's the second that actual existence, not just time, existence began the moment it exploded. And the human brain says, well, what happened before that? Well, there was no before that. This is when we can mathematically or intellectually tell ourselves, yes, okay, there was nothing. Time did not exist before that. But we don't have the synopses to understand it. We just have enough brain power, enough horsepower to believe it based on the math. But we don't really understand it. If the universe is a bubble expanding, which appears to be, then the natural inclination for pretty sophisticated group of tree apes is, well, if it's an expanding bubble, what's on the other side of the bubble? And the answer is nothing. And people say, you mean like what, like a vacuum? No, a vacuum is something. There's nothing on the other side. Is it like a giant white out? Is it just this gray mush? There is nothing there. There's no existence there. It's a coin with one side. And we can't process that. We can understand it, we can test it, experiment, prove it's true, but we can't understand it. And this is where I have my problem with these scientists, these cosmologists and the climate guys and all the rest of them. This is where I have a real problem with them. They are too narcissistic or blinded, in the best case, blinkered, to not be able to see that they cannot understand it, because they understand the math of it well enough, and their mind says, okay, well, there's nothing on the other side of this. Okay, great. And they can do all the work that they need to do. We've done incredible things, unbelievably amazing things with our minds, and we continue to do so. I'm very, 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 very proud of that. But when a scientist says that there's nothing on the other side of this, he's right. He's got scientific evidence to prove this cosmologically. And so he can go around the rest of his life, or her life, saying, yes, the universe expanded into nothingness, and he's or she is correct about this, but they don't understand what that means. They just understand it's there. I don't think Einstein or anybody else is smart enough to understand what that means. We just don't have the horsepower. And unlike those people, I seem to be one of the few people that recognizes that there is a horsepower limit to what we can understand. and to assume that we don't, that everything is comprehensible to us, is, as I've said many times, it's like expecting a chimp to fly an instrument approach. Chimps are smart animals. They're intelligent for the animal kingdom. I could train a chimp for 100,000 years, and just generations of chimps, and they're never going to fly an instrument approach, ever. They're just not going to do it. And neither is if a chimp can't do it, then a bird can't do it either. And you can't get an ant to fly an instrument approach. And this idea that we have a brain that's capable of understanding everything that is because we're just so incredibly sophisticated is so obviously incorrect that I don't know how people this smart refuse to see it and factor it into their equations. That's what science is supposed to do. Science is supposed to take human vanity and envy and covetousness for your own theories. It's supposed to take that out of the equation. But the idea that we understand this because we understand how it moves is nuts. And this is why we're in the trouble we're in, because we've had generations now of scientists, guys like Hawking are a great example, so Carl Sagan for that matter, who are selling science as a belief system based on the results that science produces. And science produces some terrific results. We're sitting here having this conversation because of scientific thinking. And open heart surgery is a result of scientific thinking. And all of that stuff is great, but it's not... Science is not an answer. Science is a instrument we use to get answers. But science isn't the answer. Science teaches us what kind of questions to ask. Anyway, so yes, I had not thought about it. I wasn't aware of this aspect of it, but it doesn't surprise me that a number of scientists would say, no, the Big Bang can't be right because it sounds precisely like Genesis. That's not a scientific reaction. That's an emotional reaction. That is an emotional reaction to the individual who made a statement like that, or a statement like that, is saying, I refuse to accept the evidence for this scientific theory because I am so emotionally invested in the idea that it is possible for us to know everything that I cannot accept the idea that there are things that are out of bounds, and the only things that are out of bounds would be a creator. Because if the universe is materialistic and mechanistic, it's just a matter of time and theory and instrumentation. But if the universe is a box made by something that lives outside the box, then all you can do as a scientist in the box is come up with a perfect example or understanding of what happens inside the box. You have no way of knowing what's going on outside the box, let alone measuring it or understanding it. And this bothers some people. I have never heard anyone else talk about this, but this is what I believe is the case. I believe that's the emotional blind spot that science has. So just, kind of back to your question there, it's not something I've been aware of, but yes. And design means designer. Designer means purpose. Purpose means responsibility. Responsibility means judgment. There is a hubristic aspect to humanity. I know I'm the first to break everybody that news. That is both our worst enemy and our best friend. It's the thing that causes us so much trouble, but it's also the thing that allows us this belief that there's nothing beyond our understanding has gotten us a lot of understanding and continues to do so. Structure of DNA and quarks and Large Hadron Collector and going to the moon, all this stuff. It's all based on this curiosity that we have, and I'm not entirely sure there's an evolutionary basis for that level of curiosity, frankly, which and I bring that up only because that could be considered a data point for a creator. If you grant the case that there's a creator, and here I am trying to explain to you the motives of God in much the same way that a tapeworm is explaining my motivations, but it seems to me that if you were out there alone as this ultimate creative force, you'd build something that looks quite a bit like what we've got. You would build a place that was interesting, and then you would build creatures that were interested in interesting things, because they would do things that were unpredictable or unexpected. Now, if you buy the premise that God is omniscient, then that's obviously seems to follow as well. But I also believe it'd be possible, if God's omniscient and omnipotent, for him to turn off his omniscience and just kind of sit there and go fishing and kind of say, "Let's see what they're going to do now." Yeah, I could look ahead and know, but I'd rather just watch and see what these creatures do with their free will. If I was alone in a universe, I would build creatures that would be unpredictable, because that would be interesting. If everything was unpredictable, there'd be no structure. In fact, if all of the animals were unpredictable, then you would never have the ability of an unpredictable animal to develop, because we're dependent on predictable things like the migration of the caribou and what kind of fish you use for what kind of bait you use for what kind of fish. But it's clear that we are anomalous. And again, I come back to my friend Jim, who said the thing about nature is that nature's never wrong. That took a little. What do you mean, Jim? Nature's never wrong. He says bees never do anything unbee-like. A bee never gets to be an unbee, and a bee never gets to do things that bees do, that bees don't do. That's true for dogs and animals. We're the only, and so this is when I pitched in my 2 cents for what it's worth, when I realized just the fundamental, obvious simplicity and beauty of that idea is that bees cannot be wrong. Bees do what bees do, and they do it all the time. Then that means that, I talked about this on the lounge based on the speech I gave, humans are so adaptable, or so programmable, they're so pliable, that only humans can have differing behaviors. And that means that only humans can make mistakes or errors. And by this I mean a moral error. No one blames Twain was all over this subject. No one ever blames a lion. No one ever calls a lion a murderer because it eats a baby gazelle, right? You don't see the vegans and the PETA folks out there protesting lions eating baby gazelles, which I found that to be rather interesting. I thought you're in favor of these little things. Yes. I thought baby gazelles have as much a right to live as everybody else. Yes. Well, then why aren't you out there doing something about this? Well, it's because it's not humans. We're the bad guys. And to some degree, that's true, because we know different. We have the choice. Lion doesn't have a choice. We have a choice. And by the way, did anybody see Senator Kennedy talking about this woke thing and how badly things have changed? It looked like it was at CPAC. He was doing his speech and he was saying, we used to do all these things, ride our bikes, candy bars, we were all real slim and everything. Now kids out there today are walking around with these bags, these little zip bags of kale for energy. And he said, you know what kale tastes like to me? He said, kale tastes like I'd rather be fat. And I just thought, man, we got a small number of really cool people out there. So Twain's argument was that animals cannot do evil things because they don't have what he called the moral sense. They can't tell right from wrong. because there is no wrong. They don't. The wolf doesn't have the choice to not eat the rabbit, and so no one blames the wolf. But presumably, according to these these animal rights, look, I'm all about protecting animals and cruelty and pets and all the rest of it, but this idea that somehow humans are not allowed to, that we're not allowed to be part of the food chain, we're not allowed to eat other animals the way other carnivorous animals do. Somehow that's evil for us to do this. I just don't get it. Now, if you want to talk about conditions in like chicken farms or pig farms, now you're on some sort of ground. But this moral idea that humans have no right to eat other animals because we've suddenly developed enough technological skills that theoretically we don't have to, I don't know where that comes from. If a wolf gets to eat a pork chop, then why is that okay and me not? Anyway, so all of this stuff essentially just sort of flows. One thing flows from the other. If there's a creator, then that means that that this be fruitful and multiply, and that the world is your dominion, and all the rest of it is. There are times when I saw a video just yesterday, the day before, of a bunch of protesters inside a Chick-fil-A, and they're always the same. They're always these skinny, ugly, white chicks in college, and a couple of their simp escorts, and these 20-year-old idiots think somehow that this is making them virtuous. They're standing in a Chick-fil-A. That's not correct. They're marching through a Chick-fil-A. There's 7 or 8 of them are holding up signs, and they're saying things like, chickens have a right to live just like all of us. Chickens want to live just like we do. And when I hear that kind of thing, my response is just to not get angry, just go directly to snark. It's like, I just want to stop one of them and just say, you're right. I never really thought about it. But how many chickens are there out there now, right at this very second, who would be writing poetry or mapping the position of stars or composing sonatas or so on, but they're being carted off to these execution camps and just simply slaughtered for their meat. When I think about the amount of music and art and science that we're eliminating by eliminating these creatures that that have the same level of consciousness as us. It's like, why are we killing these chickens and sending them to Chick-fil-A? Why aren't we sending them to grad school so that they can become their fullest selves and develop poetry and things like that? This is the narcissism of this opinion. Now I'm an animal lover. Even when I had no money, I was still making monthly donations to the California Wildlife Center. Because I've been there 7 or 8 times, and Howie was this little bird that basically brought me to Jesus, and I took him there, and they do good work there, and they're run by volunteers, and I've probably taken 5 wild animals out to this place at some point or another, injured squirrels or whatever. It's a decent drive too. It's probably a 45-minute drive. We had a crow that had broken its wing in the backyard, and I had to go wrap a towel around that guy and drive him out to the wildlife center and stuff because I can. And Natasha's the same way. Natasha's extremely sensitive to this. Every time she sees a wildfire, the first thing she thinks about is all the animals that are caught there, and I just have to kind of say to her, honey, this is Earth, this is planet Earth, this is the planet we live on. This is what happens here, and It's not in our control, and so you can't. I'm not saying you can't. I'm saying it's not good for you to lament things that are beyond your control. I mean, yes, it's sad, but this is the world. This is where we live. This is the place. I got that line from Zoe. We were talking about something on Virtue Signal, and sure would be nice if this or that and something horrible was happening. And Zoe said, "Yeah, well, welcome to Earth. This is Earth. This is what happens here." But you know, I saw again probably an hour before the show. I saw somebody arguing with these two protesters, who, by the way, were really remarkably fat, young 20-year-old women at college, remarkably fat. And they're not getting that kind of weight by eating kale. Not saying they're eating Chick-fil-A, but I am saying they're eating processed something or other. But they were saying that, it was actually, it wasn't, it was a guy he was an abortion abolitionist. And he was saying, does a chicken have a right to life? Yes. What about a chicken egg? Yes. What about a blade of grass? Yes. What about this? And all these young girls would go, yes, these things all have a right to life. Yes. And he's saying, so you're saying the only thing that doesn't have a right to life on this planet is a human being, right? That the most complex creature capable of the most diverse emotions and the highest potentials, they're the only ones that are not allowed, that do not have a right to life. And that's what they believed, because they've been taught to hate humanity and all the rest of it. Comes a time when sometimes I get angry enough at the argument. I don't get angry at the animals. It's not their fault. They're too smart to be making those kind of statements, animals. But sometimes I get angry enough at the argument when somebody says, how can you just eat chickens like that, And my response is, well, my primary motivation, if you'd really like to know, miss, is revenge. That's why I'm a eat the number of chickens. I've dispatched, God knows how many chickens, tens of thousands, maybe more, hundreds of thousands of chickens. I do it out of revenge. What? Yeah, I do it out of revenge. For hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of years, dinosaurs ate mammals. And I'm descended from mammals. And chickens are descended from dinosaurs. And I'm saying, this is just payback, man. If you were nice to us back then, we'd be nice to you now, but you weren't. You just nothing but ate all of our ancestors all the time, as many as you could get. So now it's just payback. Sorry, you should have evolved faster. And you didn't. So we've been around for eating you guys for, let's say 1 million years, and you've been eating us for 500 million years, and so after another 499 million years of us knocking off chickens, then perhaps we could find some kind of truce. P7 2017 says, what about reparations for chickens? I'll pay reparations to chickens for the 1 million years we've been eating chickens once they pay my ancestors reparations for the 500 million years they've been eating mammals. So I apply that argument to many reparations arguments. All right, let's go back and see what else we can do to get out of this show here. Roadrunner says, had all these things to ask, then deleted them multiple times for coming across too negative. Don't worry about negative. We can deal with negative here. So here's one, which I guess I can ask. Who's the target audience for story mechanics? Apologize if I've already stated this in previous episodes, but if you have, just say it again. The target episode for the honest answer is I don't know yet. So that's actually a profound question. And it's not that I didn't consider this, as obviously I considered it, but the answer is I'm not 100% sure yet. My idea behind story mechanics was that politics is becoming more and more divisive and destructive, and that by responding to politics with more politics is essentially serving the purpose of the people who are pushing this division down on top of us. And this isn't like a conspiracy theory or anything. It's just evidence, right? This transgendered athlete thing and men swimming in women's competitions was not something that was put forward by the parents. They found, the left found one person who was willing to do it, And then the government mandated this into law. So somebody is doing their level best to divide us, and the more fighting we do, the more they're succeeding. Now, I don't want to stop fighting them, and I certainly don't want to stop fighting their ideas, but it occurred to me that everybody's so deep in their trenches now that nobody will listen to what a Republican has to say, and no Republicans will listen to what a Democrat had to say, but that we learn through stories, that stories are hardwired into us, that we don't have any appreciation for how much we learn through stories. And furthermore, my contention, just another one of these sort of mental breakthroughs that I have occasionally every 35 or 40 years or so. When I thought about how left-wing Hollywood is, I thought, well, why are we even still here, given the power of the weapons that the left has? I mean, Hollywood is just so left-leaning. Why are we here? And I remember Jamie Foxx saying, doing some kind of gun control video right at the same time as Django Unchained came out. And just the hypocrisy of that, that's when a little light in my head went off and said, yes, the entertainment industry is as left-wing as it possibly could be, but entertainment is as right-wing as anything could possibly be. Entertainment is inherently and irreversibly conservative. It is about individuals, and it is about empowered individuals. This is where I came up with my pithy little statement that I've used so often that it's just essentially muddy now. But basically, the reason I can say entertainment is conservative is because nobody goes to see a James Bond movie so they can watch James Bond deliver a harshly worded letter to the United Nations and then drive off in a Prius at a reasonable speed. It just doesn't happen. People don't want that. People want excitement. James Bond, as an example, is about a masculine man with a gun defending a beautiful woman, driving in high speed away in an expensive piece of machinery as he tries to do good in the world and protect the rest of us. And you take that one sentence, you can't find a single thing in there that's left-wing. That's all conservative values. Individuality, freedom, responsibility, guns, cars, all of it. And left-wingers can put left-wing ideas onto right-wing entertainment, but they can't do it without ruining the entertainment, which is why Star Wars is gone and Star Trek is gone. They can't make... what they're trying to do goes against human biology, which is why they're trying to do it, because you can never tell no. There's no such thing as no for progressives. Anything that says no to them, they will fight to the death against, just because they should be allowed to do whatever they want to all the time. And that's the philosophy of infants. But there is no liberal entertainment. Got news for you. Bill Bond is gone too. I know he's gone. Bond is gone. In the last movie, they kind of brought the black chick in who's going to replace Bond, and certainly Indiana Jones they're trying to replace with that pale British, resting bitch face twig who is going to pick up the whip and the hat, and you can't even lift the whip, let alone swing around by it. I'm not saying they're not able to ruin it. I've spent the last 20 years of my life watching them ruin Star Trek and Star Wars. They can ruin it, but what they can't do is they can't make their own version of it. They can't. If there was left-wing entertainment that people were flocking to and buying toys for, that kind of thing, then I'd be worried, but that's not what they're doing. In fact, the fact that they have to infiltrate like parasite wasps into Star Trek, Star Wars, James Bond, Doctor Who, Ghostbusters, and all the rest of it is an admission that not only are they not capable of writing entertainment, their philosophy doesn't allow them to write entertainment. You can't be a collectivist and tell a collectivist story. It's not possible. Even if you want to, even if you're a good storyteller and you want to tell a story about a collective, let's take a football team story like We Are Marshall, something like that. Okay, so it's about the Marshall football team and the plane crash and all the rest of it. But you can't tell the story about about 60 people or 80 people. You tell the story of the football team by studying 5 or 6 individuals who are part of the team. And so you're back to individuals again, and personality and actions and decisions, responsibility, all that jazz. So they can't win. And we tell everything we learn is through stories. The Bible's a series of stories. Aesop's Fable's a series of stories. Even our alphabet is turned into a song, which is kind of a story. We're wired to learn through stories. That's the most efficient way to learn things. And when you talk about people who I hate history. History is just so boring. Well, that's because you got a teacher who thinks that history is just understanding dates. This thing happened on this date. Remember that. Okay, now here's something else that happened on another date. Of course you don't like history. That's because you're not being taught history. You're being taught dates. What's the story? What's the story? And this is where I'm at my best, when I can find things like RK theory, something like Universe 25 experiment with mice, the fourth turning, all of these things that are interesting intellectually, if you can understand them well enough to be able to get the essence of them, spin them together in a ball, put some emotion behind it, then people will learn things because it's presented as a story. This is the story. So my justification and enthusiasm for story mechanics is, number one, we're cutting out all the deadwood here because we're going right to how people learn. Not what they learn, how they learn. They learn through stories. And the people I'm going to be interviewing, which you may or may not have noticed, are all conservatives. And so they are going to bring a conservative perspective to how we learn, but they're not going to be talking about politics, which means that should open this up to a large number of people who aren't getting the message otherwise. It's a stealth tactic, basically. So if I can't talk about, I can sit here and do a firewall about how conservatives are happier people than liberals and that all of these other things, and nobody will listen to that if they're not already on the page. Or I can have John Voight talk about the heart of gold, and I can have him talk about why it is that a character on the exterior who is so unlikable becomes likable. What is it about Joe Buck? What is it about Billy Flynn from The Champ that makes you like them? Because they're loathsome people. Well, in the case of The Champ, he's a loathsome guy who really, really, really loves his son and is not only ready to die for his son, he does die for his son. And Joe Buck is a male prostitute. That is a person who deals with, especially a gigolo. Men tend not to have the emotional attachments, but a male prostitute like Joe Buck in Midnight Cowboy is a guy who is hurting women in order for money. But the thing about Joe Buck is, when he realizes he hurts women, he stops. One of the early scenes in the movie is where he meets, was it Brenda Vaccaro? No, it wasn't Brenda Vaccaro, it was somebody. He gets picked up, as soon as he gets to New York, gets picked up by the really sophisticated, New York, bitch, basically. She invites him up to her penthouse apartment. They go for a tumble. When it's over, Joe Buck asks for like $20 or something. And when this woman realizes that this good-looking guy wants to be paid, she has an absolute meltdown because she thought she was pretty enough for him to want to do it just because she was pretty enough. And she said, I'm still beautiful, I'm still this, I'm still that. And Joe Buck is like, what the devil is going on here, I thought we were clear about that. And so it's his innocence. The people who are around Ratso Rizzo, on the other hand, are intentionally hurting each other the best of their ability all the time. Joe Buck is not like that. He's bringing red state innocence into the darkest part of blue state America. And he makes some compromises and he gets dirty doing it. But he doesn't ever lose the heart of gold. There's one possible moment when maybe he did, but it's not shown. It's not shown on camera, and I'm very curious to know what John's opinion on what his character did off camera, yes or no. But the reason I decided to do this story mechanics thing was I realized I could talk about good and evil without talking about Republicans and Democrats. And that not to mention the fact that the celebrity star power would open this up to people who wouldn't otherwise see it. And it dawned on me that if I were to do a series of interviews with conservatives talking about what made characters either interesting or lovable, then I could get the morality behind conservatism to people without them having to listen to Republicans or conservatives. When I first talked to Adam Baldwin about this, I want to talk to Adam Baldwin about the tough guy, and because that's what he plays. And when I talked to Adam on the phone, I said, what interests me is the difference between a tough guy and the psychopathic mass murderer. Because Animal Mother in Full Metal Jacket is right there, man. He is there to be the psychopath mass murderer, but yet there's something, but yet the audience is on his side. Why is that? How did that happen? He's there, he's the gung-ho, kill 'em all kind of thing. And he's supposed to be the warning sign, as opposed to Matthew Modine's, Joker, who's the kind of the liberal, wow, we can talk it out. He's the big intellectual guy. Animal Mother's he's an animal mother. He's got his M60 pig and he just wants to just kill everything in sight. So why are we sympathetic to him? I said to Adam. And Adam said, because he's a man, that's why. Because he's not conflicted about, yes, Adam Baldwin is in Jane. Yes, he's third or fourth on the list. He's in for sure. He's confirmed. Because he's not conflicted about what he has to do. And I said to him, and I'll say this on the air, and I know the language is a little offensive, I don't care. I said, that's it, isn't it, Adam? That's it. Joker is there to comment on the war and to make judgment on the war. But Animal Mother's just there to kill gooks because that's what war's about. He said, yeah, that's exactly right. He's not dicking around. He's not trying to, he's there to do a job. He's doing his job. And his job is to kill gooks. And so since he's there, might as well do as good a job as you can. And that's what war is. And I thought that's exactly right. And then when you get into Firefly Serenity, his tough guy character changes because Animal Mother in Full Metal Jacket has a purity about him. A lack of pretense is a better word. But Jane gets laughs. He gets the best laughs in the show. And the way he gets those laughs is really interesting to me. Because when in Firefly Serenity, when Jane gets a laugh, you're not laughing at Jane. You're laughing at Jane pointing out how ridiculous this situation is. He also has a simplicity and a clarity. So, to answer your question, Road Rider, it's a way of dealing. It's a way of getting across concepts that are important for society to remain healthy. What's good and what is evil? What makes a good man? What makes a bad man? Where's the line? If you cross it, can you come back? And it was a way to do this. And hey, look, Gary Sinise, John Voight, and people like that, and bring in some fans who are not in politics at all. But the main thing was to not touch the words Republican, Democrat, liberal, or conservative. Just don't touch them. Have a show that would get people beyond their political opinions and something so that even if you were like the biggest Biden supporter, Hillary supporter, left-wing progressive, what he's saying is making sense about the human condition and get you to be thinking about things differently. That's the target audience there. Chris Taylor. Hi, Bill. I assume you'll be doing some weekend trial runs of the Story Mechanics interview show with beta interviewees to work out all the bugs of the process, work instructions, settings, etc. in the simulator. If you pick Strata Loungers as the beta interviewees, would you consider posting them at the end of the season as a sort of a behind-the-scenes special feature? I'd like to see you drawing out interesting trucker story from Ms. Dark or quizzing Mr. Blake on hat etiquette. Just a thought. I believe the trucker is our friend G.K. Masterson. I need to do technical tests with this because, first of all, Chris, the answer to your question is yes. It's a damn excellent idea, and I should use more than one person. And what I should do is I should have a number of conversations with 3 or 4 of our Strata Loungers who volunteer, and then I should do a cut down of the most interesting moments of those things and just put that up there just for the fun of it. My challenge with story mechanics is I need to get the very best possible look from people who are going to be using webcams at home. Now, 5 years ago, I would have said that the webcam was almost a deal killer, but what I've come to learn is the more produced things look on YouTube, the less authentic they are, and people aren't interested in production values. They're interested in authenticity. With that said, I'd like the webcam footage to look as good as it can, and there's software that where basically I just sent, it has to be simple, right? I can't expect John Voight or Gary Sinise or anybody to install, OBS Studio and then learn how to save the files. It's just off the table. So I found some software called Riverside that basically you send a link, the person clicks on the link, they show up. The software has the conversation occurring at something like 640p or 720p or something, but it's also writing the data to that person's file without them having to do anything. And when the session closes, the software that lives on the cloud goes back down to John Voight's computer and pulls this high resolution file that it recorded without, I'm not saying so much without John knowing, but without him having to do all this. It just goes and gets a high quality version, uploads that, then I can download both of those and edit them. They're separate streams. If I'm interviewing 5 different people, I get 5 different streams, 5 different files, and I can put them together any way I want to. So that's going to take some beta testing because I can't have that go wrong. I don't want to spend 2 hours and a half of John Voight's time and then just say, hey, John, guess what? We had a technical problem. I have to do this again. He would do it again, but it wouldn't be the same. You just lose all the freshness. So that's an excellent idea, and I hope to be able to do that. We will do that because it'd be great to see some of you guys in person, by the way. Eric, if you forgive me, I'm getting a little late and a little tired. I'm going to take your second question. That's the backup question. Backup question in case it's a light night. So, Bill, what's the single greatest Christmas movie ever made, and why is it Die Hard? I, for the life of me, do not understand the Die Hard is a Christmas movie controversy. I don't have an opinion on it, yes or no. I just saw Die Hard, and it never occurred to me that it was a Christmas movie. This is one of the great debates of our time now, of the age. This is one of the great conflicts of Western civilization. It's practically the equivalent of the split with Martin Luther from the Catholic Church. Is Die Hard a Christmas movie, yes or no? And my honest answer is I don't know how anybody can come to either one of those conclusions because I just saw it as an action film. Now, that's the end of the second part of the question. The first part of the question is what's the single greatest Christmas movie ever made? And in my mind, there is no question about that whatsoever, zero. And that is the greatest Christmas movie ever made is It's a Wonderful Life. It's a Wonderful Life is one of the greatest movies ever made, period. But It's a Wonderful Life It's a Wonderful Life is It's a Wonderful Life would be one of the best films ever made, even if it wasn't at Christmas. I mean, you could theoretically set It's a Wonderful Life on any given day out of the week, but it's not any given day out of the week. It's Christmas Eve. But the thing about It's a Wonderful Life being the greatest Christmas movie ever made is it's a movie that's bookended at Christmas, but it's not about Christmas at all. That's what makes It's a Wonderful Life such a fantastic Christmas film. It's not about Christmas. It's a Wonderful Life is about everything other than Christmas. It's just that Frank Capra was such a genius that he knew that this was the perfect stage for the reveal, that this was the perfect... See, emotions in storytelling, emotions are generated by contrast. It's not how hot something gets, it's what is the temperature difference between it and what's around it. Matter of fact, on this very subject, I was thinking about this just strangely enough last night. I was thinking, okay, so an internal combustion engine, or let me rephrase that, a nuclear reactor works because you've got a very hot thing, which is the reactor, and then you've got that heat gets transferred to a coil of water, and then that coil of water transfers heat to a second coil of water. So the reactor is hot, it gets the water hot, the water boils, the steam goes through a turbine, drives the turbine, does the work, cools down into water, goes back around again. That's how that power source works on a nuclear reactor. And nuclear reactors get very, very hot. And I was just thinking the other day, would this work if you had a reactor that was 200 degrees below zero centigrade, surrounded by fluids that were 400 degrees below zero centigrade? And I don't know whether it would be a turbine thing, but yes, my understanding is that anytime you've got a temperature incline, anytime there's a difference between two temperatures, you can get work done out of that. So I imagine it's possible to have a reactor that's core temperature is 200 degrees below zero, so long as the fluid and everything else in the and the environment it was working in was 500 degrees, 400 degrees below zero. It's the temperature gradient. It's the difference. Likewise, if you had a reactor that was operating at 2,000 degrees centigrade, and the cooling temperature outside was also 2,000 degrees centigrade, the environment outside the reactor was the same temperature as the temperature inside the reactor. You wouldn't get any work done. So it's about the difference, and the greater the difference, the more the hot stuff wants to go to where the cold stuff is, and the more work gets. Physical work in the physics term gets done. So it's the same way with entertainment. You can have happy people, and let's just say you set the happiness at 7 on a scale of I'm going to get too close to absolute zero. You get the idea anyway. So if you set, let's say, absolute total ecstasy joy is a 10 and complete utter misery is a 0. You can have a movie that ends on a 7 or an 8, and it will be much more moving if it's a 7 or an 8 coming out of a 1 or a 2 than if it was a 9 coming out of an 8. It's all about the contrast, about the temperature differential. And It's a Wonderful Life is so successful because mostly it's so successful because of two honest-to-God absolute geniuses, and one of them is Frank Capra and the other is Jimmy Stewart. It's the best Christmas movie because the fact that the resolution happens. The resolution could have happened on any night. The resolution could have happened on a Tuesday night in September. You could still have the story of a guy who has this unbelievable crisis happen in the real world to the point where he's ready to commit suicide, and then an angel appears and shows him what his life would be like if he hadn't lived. He comes home at night and realizes that could have happened on a Could have happened on August 27th, and it would have worked. But the contrast is that Christmas night is the most joyous night of the year. At Christmas Eve and the gathering of all the friends and the brothers and everybody else coming together. So when everybody comes together to help George Bailey, they could have done that on August 27th. But the fact that they do it on Christmas multiplies its intensity. And the fact that he's got tears in his eyes hugging his family in front of a Christmas tree is more powerful than him doing it in front of a hat stand, because that's what we want out of Christmas. We want that. Christmas has a joy embedded in us culturally. And Capra was smart enough to understand that people are sentimental about Christmas, that they love Christmas, that Christmas makes them happy. And so what he did was he gave them a movie where the guy got the greatest Christmas present of all time. And he got it right at the last minute. And the consequences, the stakes were high. It wasn't like, oh, here's a present for you, George. If you don't get it, no big deal. It's like, you're either going off of the bridge and you're gonna destroy everybody's life, all of the family that loves you, all of the people. You're gonna turn Bedford Falls into Potterville, George, if you jump off this bridge. And it's the contrast that makes that movie work. And I've seen that movie, I don't know, 7, 8 times. I cannot watch the ending of that movie without just choking up. I just can't. I just can't. I don't think anybody can, really. It's so perfectly beautiful. There you go. Jake Holter has got a great line. The greatest validation of all time is the validation of his worth. Yes. That's the greatest Christmas present that George Bailey could get, was that his life was not in vain, despite the fact that he was beginning to think that it was, right? I mean, prior to the crisis with Uncle Billy and all the rest of it, I wish I'd done this. I wish I'd done that. I wanted to see the world. I'm stuck here in this boring town. I'm just a banker. I don't do anything. Couldn't see what he had right in front of him. So you could also do a version of It's a Wonderful Life, a far less effective version, where you don't even really need the bank closing crisis. You could tell the story of a guy who just wished he was somewhere else, and then this angel appears and shows him, no, this is not only where you need to be, this is where you're at your happiest. But this is where Capra comes in. He's just a master of these emotions. He understands the contrast. You can't have people crying with happiness unless they're about to cry with sadness. There's no temperature gradient there. Did the same thing with Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. The redemption of Mr. Smith at the end of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington means nothing if Jimmy Stewart hasn't been out on the Senate floor filibustering to the point where he cannot speak anymore and that he is convinced that he's lost. The third of Capra's great films, not nearly many people have seen. So in my opinion, he's got this trilogy that are very similar, and they're all brilliant. It's a Wonderful Life is the best known. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington is the second best known. And it's been a long time since I've seen it, but I recall when I watched it, it was actually my favorite of the three. And it was a film called Meet John Doe with Gary Cooper. And I need to see that again. I haven't seen Meet John Doe since I was in college, since I was in film school in college. But of the Capra films that this film professor showed us, he decided to show us Meet John Doe instead of the other two. And Meet John Doe is the same formula. You've got a good man and a good cause, and you spend the first 2/3 of the movie feeling this excitement and affinity and developing a love for all of this. And then just when things look like they're going to go great, he pulls the rug out from underneath you and sends him into absolute ruin and despair. And that's such a punch in the gut that when the redemption comes at the end, you feel better about him than you did before he got dirty. And And this is the difference between old movies and new movies. Old movies used to make you love something and then destroy it in front of your eyes so that when they brought it back again, you felt even better than you did before because of the relief. New movies get you to love something and then they just destroy it because they want you to go out of the theater feeling like crap. Because this apparently shows other filmmakers that you've just got enough guts to make an audience of those knuckle-dragging dweebs, those Neanderthals in flyover country. They want their happy ending, but I'm not going to give it to them. Screw them. I'm going to subvert their expectations. Well, Ryan Johnson, director of The Last Jedi, you certainly did subvert our expectations. We had expectations that a Star Wars movie would be fun, that it would be uplifting, that it would make us feel better than we did when we went in, and you're absolutely right. You subverted all of our expectations, and we all came out feeling worse. And you could have done that on another movie, but you were given Star Wars, and you were given Star Wars by one of the most evil people that has ever walked this planet. And she decided she wanted you to subvert everybody's expectations about Star Wars, which meant the journey of the hero, which meant a male rescuing a woman. It meant, I don't have to go through this again. Admiral Holdo is she's the anti-Luke. She's not even a villain. She's supposed to be a hero. This is how incompetent they are. Rey and Holdo, in Kathleen Kennedy's opinion, are people we should be looking up to. And I despise both of them. I don't really despise Rey. Daisy Ridley seems very nice. There was nothing about Rey that I hated. I just didn't buy it. I didn't care. And Admiral Holdo is a feminist attempt at looking at the shadows on the wall of a cave to understand what male authority is and how it functions. This is what this emotionally crippled, bitter woman sees as male authority. She thinks that male military command authority is predicated on insulting people and rubbing their noses in your authority. When in point of fact, while people like that exist, nobody leads that way. She's incapable of comprehending what makes effective male military leaders. And so all she can see are the things that she's capable of seeing. He's got authority, and the way I show authority is by proving to somebody that I'm better than them. I'll humiliate them, and I'll make them take a knee to me in front of everybody else, and that will be how I'll exercise authority as a military leader. That she thinks that's what men do, and that's how that works. She, as usual, got it 100% backwards. The great leaders are the ones who protect the people below them from their superiors. So when things go wrong, they take responsibility to protect the people below them. And when things go right, they pass the credit downward and keep none of it for themselves. That's what real leadership is. She's just, South Park Pandaverse hit the nail on the head, right? And Kathleen Kennedy, of course, decided to sue South Park or do something to block the message that she's an insecure bitch with no talent. And so when South Park portrayed her as an insecure bitch with no talent, the first thing this insecure bitch with no talent did was trying to find a way to legally stop South Park from saying that she was an insecure bitch with no talent. Writes itself, kind of, doesn't it? And I'm glad. I'm really, really glad that Into the Pandaverse universe thing was just classic. The four the way they drew those four chicks, with their stance, and the Asian girl and the black girl and the Puerto Rican girl, and just the attitude was just spot on. It was absolutely perfect. 3 to go. Broke college student. Hello, Bill. Hello, broke college student. How are you? One of our Gen Z heroes of the coming days. Recently took my younger brother to see the new Godzilla film. I suspect the magic of going to the movies has been lessened by alternatives such as home theaters, but I think the changes to theaters in the last couple of years have made the customer lose something. There's a part of me that wants to not have the option to order concessions on my phone. Yeah, can you do that now? During a movie? I'm sure you can. Why not? Anytime anybody answers a text in a movie theater in front of me, I don't care if there's no sound or anything. I'm watching the movie, and if a light goes on down here, I'm not watching the movie anymore. It's that simple. Yes, 100% with you. This is how movie theaters will slit their own throats. Same way that churches do, Same way that so many churches do. People are less religious these days, so what we're going to do is we're going to make our church a very unreligious church. We're not going to stress the Christianity thing at all. It's like, that's why people are there, you moron, So they want to get people into movie theaters for the movie-going experience, and then if I'd never heard of this particular thing before, and then what we'll do is make sure that we ruin the movie-going experience every way we can. Idiots. What effect does having a highly automated process have on the customer and wider society? Automated kiosks, online ticket sales, pre-ordered concessions. That's an interesting question. What level of convenience cheapens the experience? Is there a necessary amount of wait, anticipation, or work needed to enjoy an activity? Another example includes waiting outside a video game store for a new release. Well, that's a really great question. So I'm obviously a movie buff, but I would certainly never describe myself as a cinemaphile because I have too much self-respect for that, and I'm conscious of my dignity. But where we live, there are the best theaters. I've been going to movies forever in various kinds of actual movie theaters, and the ones that I've been going to even before I met Natasha is a movieplex in the Sherman Oaks Galleria, which looks nothing like what it did back when they made Fast Times at Ridgemont High. It's not even recognizable. They just knocked it down and put something else up. But there's a movieplex there that used to be ArcLight theaters, and ArcLight theaters were fantastic. ArcLight Sherman Oaks went away because of COVID, and I was relatively sure that it was just never going to open again. It was bought by Regal, and it's still 80%, 90% is good. It's just ArcLight had something there that I can't quite put my finger on. But any of it, it's more or less the same thing. So I can answer your question. Back when it was ArcLight, in the lobby they had like a coffee thing. They had a bar and they had a little restaurant, not a big one, but a little restaurant. And if you got there early, you could sit down and have a nice, you could have a Denny's steak. But you could have a cocktail or two, and I thought that was great. Natasha and I probably used that 2 or 3 times. The snack bar was okay, They had kind of deluxe hot dogs, which they don't have anymore. None of that was particularly enticing. The thing about ArcLight that I can remember was that was the first theater that I went to regularly in my life where I could buy reserved seats. And that is really important to me. For those of you out there, I don't know if there are, I don't know, all I've been is to ArcLight and Regal for a long time. But back in the day, you didn't get to reserve a seat, and you didn't get to buy in advance. First come, first served. And if it was a popular movie, you would have to get there, hours in advance, and you'd have no idea where you were sitting. And if you got there late, you wouldn't even sit together sometimes. You're way back in a corner in a movie you really want to see. So advances in technology and customer service and things that you were talking about, things like reserved seating is fantastic. Needless to say, the quality of the projection, the quality of the sound are enormously better. But interrupting the movie by ordering on your device is just stupid. There are theaters. There's supposed to be a nice one in LA. In fact, Natasha mentioned it not too long ago. We will probably go because we know what we're getting. There are theaters in LA, I think, and around the country where you watch the movie in essentially like a lazy boy recliner, and there's a tray, and people bring you your food, and you're doing all this, and that would be an experience I would go to, because I know that I'm going for the experience of that and not just to see the movie. Now, many years ago, back in the day, when I went back to Gainesville the second time in 1993, what was that called? This Cinema Cafe or Cinema Draft House or something? They had what had one time been a restaurant, I think. I think that's how it worked. And they showed movies in there, and they had a bunch of tables. And you would go in there and watch a movie, and they're doing nothing but bringing you pitchers of beers and chicken wings, which in college is aces. And I went into those. If I ever saw something, I want to say it was Cinema Cafe and on Archer Road in Gainesville. And so when we would go to movies there, we knew that we were not going to get the movie in its purest experience. It wasn't something we like really, really, really wanted to see, because if we really, really wanted to see it, I wouldn't have seen it in that kind of distractive environment. But that was just a blast. I mean, it was just really fun. In fact, the first time I ever showed a movie that I made in front of strangers was when I made a film that went on to win a Student Academy Award for regional. It didn't win the Student Academy. It was a nominee for the Southeast region, and it was a comedy called The Pigeonhole, and we shot it on 16 millimeter film. And the first time I ever aired anything for strangers was at UF. It would be in the fall. It had to be in the fall. They had movies on the yard. So outside of the Rights Union, Student Union, it's a sloping hill, and it's all grass. And then a couple times, once a week for, usually I think during football season, somewhere around there, because it couldn't have been during the summer. It was too hot, and it couldn't have been too cold either. I want to say it was fall semester. And so they would just put up a not a terribly large screen there, and they'd put a projector up on the hill, and then everybody would just come and camp out with sleeping bags and sandwiches, and they'd just run like 4 horror films in a row till 4 a.m. That's where I saw The Hills Have Eyes, and that was a complete blast, because you're just hanging out, and everybody's got beers, and you're just sitting there eating sandwiches, lying in your sleeping bags, half awake, half asleep. You're watching trash movies that you get to laugh at and have fun with, and that was fun. And I got a chance to run my short there between the first and second movies one night. I had confidence that it would do well because it was about registering at colleges, and it was shot on campus. In fact, there was one shot right on that hill where we were watching the movie. And it went over really well, and I remember I had that experience when I went back the second time as well. I ran a first premieres of our sketch comedy show, Grazing. We did at the Cinema Cafe thing. So we'd have 300 people in there drinking beers and, eating nachos and stuff because we were late. But both times, I just remember this so clearly. It happened on both those times. Both of them were comedies. And I was in the back of the room or behind the projector so that I could see the audience and I could also see the screen. And both those times, I remember this so clearly. There would come a line that I thought was going to get a big laugh, and I'd wait for it, and the line would come, and it'd be silence, and I would just go, God damn it, I'm just dying up here. I mean, I thought that line was going to be so good, and that's how much thinking I actually got done. And then this laugh would come, and I'd realize that my brain was working so fast that I was just so excited and nervous that my brain was just, it was like time had slowed down. And I was I was analyzing the reaction to this film so fast in my head that I had time to have those thoughts in between the time amount it took for somebody to see something funny and actually laugh at it. That was quite shocking to me. So we had all just weird movies like that. You want to talk about the ultimate weird? I'll give you two weird movies that I would never go and watch in a movie theater. But if I ever found out that they were being played outdoors or something along those lines, or in a college like the Rathskeller or something, I'd go buy tickets tonight for them. The two weirdest. These are weirder than midnight movies because I don't even think you could run these. We talked before about midnight movies and seeing Monty Python and the Holy Grail or 2001: A Space Odyssey and at midnight in movie theaters. The midnight movie thing was a period in time when, fairly brief period, when people realized, well, we normally do a 9 o'clock show and shut up at 11 o'clock at night, but there's probably enough young people out there with nothing to see on TV. They probably come see weird movies at midnight, and we just get them cheap because they don't cost anything. So you see Logan's Run at midnight, or 2001: A Space Odyssey, Monty Python, all the rest of us. But the two movies that I saw in college, in public, not in a theater because they were too, because I don't think anybody would have sat through them in a theater. Everybody hold on to your hats here. Some of you will know these movies. Most of you will know the first one. I think probably fewer will know the second. The first of these weird, show it on the lawn while everybody's half awake, drinking beer and eating sandwiches in cold, was a Sean Connery movie called Zardoz. Zardoz is... Wizards is a good example, by the way. Roadrunner mentioned Wizards. Wizards, heavy metal and Wizards were two of the ones that I thought that I should include, but they didn't make the final cut. One of them was Zardoz. Zardoz is when I first saw it, I just thought, this is the strangest thing I've ever seen, and I don't get it. It's Sean Connery in a one-piece, banana hammock, bathing suit, Speedo, right after he finished James Bond. And just absolutely ridiculous. However, Zardoz really was about something really important. It was about how the aristocracy can become so bored that what they want more than anything is for somebody to come and kill them, because that would at least end the boredom and be somewhat exciting. That's what Zardoz was for me. Zardoz is one of them. And the second one was not Forbidden Planet, which is a brilliant movie. This was a brilliant movie too, but it's not Forbidden Planet. It was called Fantastic Planet. It was an animated film, French film, and it was about a race of blue aliens with almost like gills for ears, and humans were on their planet, but humans were very tiny, and they dressed us up like little pets. And then when the humans started breeding, they started this gigantic extermination program to kill all of these rogue humans that were out there, and Fantastic Planet was wild, and Steve Whoop says, I thought you didn't like anime. Fantastic Planet wasn't anime. There's nothing anime about Fantastic Planet. It was animated, but it wasn't anime. It was when these tall blue aliens started their human extermination thing, it was very powerful, and the humans won, as humans are wont to do. By the way, there is I discovered this very recently. I saw Eraserhead at midnight. Eraserhead's the greatest classic. Eraserhead's the best cult film ever made, without question. Since I saw Eraserhead at midnight on a lawn, I was half asleep and fed directly into my subconscious, and it freaked me out for days. Eraserhead is the most disturbing movie I've ever seen. It's made in Japan and animated. It's anime. No, it's not. It's not anime. Anime is a style, and you can do anime in any country It's, Seven Samurai was made in Japan, and Seven Samurai is not anime either. So it was it was a really kind of interesting movie, but Eraserhead is the most disturbing movie I've ever seen, I think. And I loved it. And it wasn't like I had to get away from it. I was just like, oh God, oh no, oh no. No, yeah, no, I know Seven Samurai wasn't animated, but it was Japanese, and you're saying anime is Japanese, and it's just I'm telling you, it wasn't anime. Um, Eraserhead is Eraserhead is so far out there that it's so far out there that you actually can't really be too grossed out by it because or too freaked out by it because it's so brilliantly far out there that you just have to kind of sit there every now and then and just say, this David, is it David Lean? No, what's his name? This director. Brazil's another one of those, but nothing touches Eraserhead. Eraserhead is Eraserhead is just Lynch. Thank you. And Eraserhead just gets more and more and more disturbing, and it comes a point when you're like, I'm speaking as a guy who's a film major and a filmmaker. Once I got over how disturbing Eraserhead was, it got to be like, how brilliant can this guy be? Can he? Oh, he's definitely gonna make me even more uncomfortable. And then it just gets to the point where it's just like I'm just gonna stand here and soak up the genius because it was just so creepy. And then Lynch, of course, he went on to make Dune, but he also made an excellent movie. He made The Elephant Man, which was an excellent movie. And The Elephant Man, when I first saw The Elephant Man, disturbed me so much because, again, like all great movie geniuses, he tells a story of a real guy, John Merrick, I want to say, if memory serves me correctly, real guy in Victorian England who had this horrendous birth defect where he had all these bone growths and his skin. He was just a monster. He was a circus freak. He was living a life of misery. He was just kept in a cage and beaten and just thrown just scraps of rotten food. And this true story in this British doctor, Victorian doctor, when they were first really trying to understand things about anatomy and the causes of diseases, sees him at a show. Anthony Hopkins, young Anthony Hopkins played the doctor, sees him at this show. You don't see him, but you see Hopkins, and Hopkins just looks at him, stares at him, and starts to cry at just how horrible it is. And so Hopkins's character, the doctor, again based on what really happened, just looks at him and just his eyes well up with tears, and it's just so powerful. So he goes in there and basically rescues this guy from the pits of this circus sidelight, takes him to a university. He stinks so badly that they have to put him into a separate ward, but there's a nurse on the ward who had treated war casualties, and she feels the sympathy for the guy. They clean him up. He's all of a sudden in clean sheets. And it turns out he's got the heart of gold. He writes poetry. He writes letters that are unbelievably moving. Again, this is all a true story. He wrote so movingly, I want to say that the Queen came and visited him in the hospital. And he became quite a celebrity. He got recaptured because he was making a lot of money. Plus then he got enormously famous. So they tried, the guys who had him a circus show tried to get him back, and he comes back, and he ends up dying relatively young. But Merrick was Lynch what Lynch did with that movie, did the same thing with Elephant Man and John Hurt played Elephant Man, and I'm virtually positive he won an Academy Award for it. Nobody else could have done it. Nobody could have done it. And what Lynch did was the same thing Spielberg did with the shark. Was for the first hour of the movie, you never got a good look at him. All you could see was the horror on the looks of the faces of other people. And when it finally came time for him to be like unveiled, we're okay, thanks. When it finally became time for him to be unveiled, I was just so apprehensive. I was like, I really don't want to see this. I really don't want to see this. And the makeup was brilliant, and the makeup made him look virtually exactly the same as John Merrick. I saw The Elephant Man on Broadway in 1979, several years before the movie was made, and it's just a brilliant film. Brilliant film. And that's what Lynch got after Eraserhead. And then he did Dune, which also had elements of that kind of body horror sort of, David Lynch kind of spin. He made a couple of other movies that were okay. I never really got into him quite so much after Elephant Man and Eraserhead, but he's obviously a brilliant guy. Joe says, I saw Elephant Man, but I was really, really little. I don't recall much. I don't think Elephant Man is a movie for really, really little kids. Frankly, it would have scared the living piss out of me. Speaking of, I said David Lean. Obviously, David Lean is not David Lynch. David Lean directed Lawrence of Arabia. David Lynch directed Razorhead, and then David Byrne is the lead singer for the Talking Heads. I mentioned this a couple weeks ago. Did either of you guys, did any of you see that commercial? The Talking Heads did a reunion concert recently, like in the last couple weeks, and I saw the commercial, and this gray-haired guy goes into a dry cleaning store, and he hands him a ticket, silver-haired guy, and he says, yeah, this has been in here for a while. I don't even know if it's still here. I just almost forgot where I left it. And so he hands the ticket over to the person doing the dry cleaning thing. And the guy, he says, yeah, I think we should got to click the button and all the suits and stuff. We come around. He takes this thing off, hands it to him, and it's this enormous, huge padded shoulder gray suit that David Byrne wore in Stop Making Sense. Dante 2 Cases, Crispy Mofas, I Can't Stand Talking Heads. Talking Heads is one of my favorite bands of all time by far. And Stop Making Sense is one of the greatest concert videos ever. And when he gets the suit, he goes, "This is it." That's when I realized it was David Byrne. And that was one of the cleverest, warmest, most effective ads I've ever seen, because he was laughing at himself, but it was just so nostalgic. And didn't it end with him trying to recreate the moves and just being like really rusty with all those things? I actually had a friend named Kelly Donnell when I was in college, and Kelly Donnell was one of those hipsters with the round glasses. He was a really great guy though, and Kelly Donnell introduced me to bands I'd never heard of, like the Talking Heads, the Police, and others, Black Flag, the Smiths, and I didn't even know any of those things exist. But he was a roommate that we had for 4 of us, or 2 actors, Kelly and me, in a dorm in the student ghetto, in a house in the student ghetto in Gainesville, and Kelly was playing Remain in Light, which was first Talking Heads album I bought, and he's singing Born Under Punches and And I just couldn't believe my eyes or my ears. I also liked very much. I also liked Laurie Anderson, who was doing things that I've never seen or heard anybody do. First heard Laurie Anderson, I just couldn't believe it. It was like, you got to understand, you're coming off of, you're coming off of Fly Robin Fly and Billy Don't Be a Hero, and the next thing you know, you're listening to this woman's doing this thing, let X equal X, and it's, what? Satellites are out tonight. And I just thought, this is just genius. I loved the early 80s. It was so exciting. Again, because of the contrast. You went from the big, wide polyester decade to the super narrow, thin tied, kind of Japanese motif, big shoulder pad, kind of elegance. You would, when I first saw Roxy Music's video, and I said, new wave music, absolutely. I saw Roxy Music do an Avalon, and it's like, there's this guy. He's dressed in a suit, and he looks fantastic, and he's just singing this really beautiful, beautiful song, And I thought, man, the world is just getting much, much more interesting, much more interesting. Yeah, I was there live when NTV went on the air for the first time. I heard about it. It was on cable. Cable was new. We didn't have cable. We just happened to be watching a friend's house for him, and cable on, and there was that date, and it's like, it's going to start now, and and then you get the dun 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 dun, and the whole Apollo astronaut flag on the moon thing. MTV, what the hell is MTV? And along comes Video Killed the Radio Star, and I thought, well, that's okay, I guess. And then Gary Newman, yeah, in Cars. But the one video when I just said, okay, I get what's going on now, was to me the first real music video was Human League, Don't You Want Me? That was like the first time I think they told like a story, and I just said, this is really cool. And I had a major, major, major thing for Martha Quinn, like in a big way. I thought she was just the coolest of the cool. I thought she was just adorable. She's still really adorable. And she was the daughter of Sally Quinn, I think. Was it Sally Quinn who wrote for Newsweek magazine? Yeah, Martha Quinn, man. Martha Quinn was the bomb. I just adored her. Just adored her. Yeah, I want my MTV. Safety Dance was unimaginably done, but fun. Yes, it was. It was all that. Yeah, Martha Quinn, boy. And I remember the five VJs. Martha Quinn. J.J. Jackson, Alan Hunter. What's that woman's name? And it was like Noah and Nora. It was Mark Goodman and the blonde who sounds like she'd been smoking cigarettes for 40 years and she was only 20 years old, and Nina Blackwood. Nina Blackwood. Yep, they were great. They were great. Those five were just something. Nina Blackwood, J.J. Jackson, Mark Goodman, Alan Hunter, and Martha Quinn. Those are fun days. All right, let's see. I think we're about done here. Steve Young. The Queen of England parachutes into the opening ceremony of the London Olympic Games. The producers asked permission to spoof Her Majesty, but the Queen herself asked to be in the video. If you don't ask, the answer is always no. I did not know that. How did I not know that? Here's a video.
I didn't have much choice.
We had this idea that we would fake the Queen, and obviously for this scenario, the James Bond scenario, so we sent it to the palace, assuming, out of courtesy, to say this is what we were going. And I remember writing the letter saying I will make sure that I pick a double who's very respectful, doesn't look silly.
And we were like thinking, Helen Mirren, who could we ask, who's a really good actor?
And then we got a message back saying, we're not bothered about the double, the Queen would like to be in it herself.
There's a moment in it where she walks past him, and you can see him as an actor just thinking, this is weird. I am a fictional spy in the service of a fictional queen, but here's the real one walking by me.
Danny Boyle came to visit me on set. He sat me down, he told me what he wanted to do, and I walked out and said...
Okay, so when they say parachuted into the scene, I assume that she actually parachuted into the scene. Sorry about the feedback, it's going away here. When they say parachuted... But yeah, that was great. I honestly, so I grew up with Queen Elizabeth. I sang God Save the Queen every day between, I don't know, age of 4 and 12, I guess. Every school day I sang God Save the Queen. All the money had Queen Elizabeth on it. Queen Elizabeth and my mom were, I think, exactly the same size and very nearly the same age, very within like a couple weeks of each other or something. And so Queen Elizabeth was, for the first part of my life, she was the queen. And I always thought she was a little bit stuffy, just a little stiff. And I hadn't seen The Crown or anything. I saw some of those episodes and stuff. I knew she was a good person, and I knew that Churchill was just crazy about her and all the rest of it. But about a year or maybe 18 months before she died, at her the 75-year jubilee or whatever, and she did that scene with Paddington Bear, and I thought that was the most beautiful, moving, humanizing British. That thing she did with Paddington was just absolutely perfection. It was just plain, I came in a little bit. Does Bill know the lyrics to, well, would that be the lyrics to God Save the Queen, the American version? My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where our fathers, that land of our pilgrims' pride. From every mountainside let freedom ring, something like that, right? Yeah. That's God Save the Queen, though. Anyway, so I did not know that, but that is a great example, and the point of the question wasn't lost on me, because you're right, Steve, if you don't ask, you don't get. It's how many times have people locked themselves out of opportunities because they're just too chicken to ask? And I'm a prime example of this, actually. But yeah, that was just wonderful. So we got one more to go, and then I'm going, yikes. And this is from George Freeland, and it is the Alpha Centauri problem. Like it already. So George says, have you considered the colony star map, the significance of the star's metallicity? Or metallicity. Yeah, metallicity. Assuming that a star's metallicity is a fair indicator of the general abundance of heavy elements in the system, it would mean that the solar system and Alpha Centauri have significant industrial advantage. Well done, George. Anyone trying to declare independence would be stuck with relatively metal poor systems. Wow. Yes. So, most of the stars, and I mean a significant majority of the stars, and it might be in somewhere 80 or maybe even 90% of the stars in our galaxy are red dwarf stars that are so low in luminosity that we can't see them. The nearest star to the Earth is invisible to the naked eye. When I was a kid growing up watching Lost in Space, I knew they're going to Alpha Centauri, so I knew what Alpha Centauri was before I knew what Florida was. And Alpha Centauri is the third brightest star in the sky. Alpha Centauri is a triple star. It's Alpha Centauri A is a G-type star, very much like our sun. B is a K-type star, which is more orange, cooler than ours. And they orbit each other relatively closely. And orbiting them at a very, 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 very big distance is an M-type red dwarf star called Proxima Centauri, which at this particular point in its orbit means it's closer to the Earth than Alpha Centauri. And so the closest star to the Earth is invisible to the naked eye because it's a red dwarf and it's so dim. We are constantly discovering red dwarfs that are closer to the sun than we thought. And there is something that is even less luminous than a red dwarf now, and that's a brown dwarf, which is a planet not much bigger than Jupiter, where there's enough mass so that the contractional gravity at the center of this slightly larger Jupiter is enough to make these brown dwarfs give off more heat. They actually emit heat, so infrared light. Invisible light, they're not really, well, they're much less visible than M stars, and those are pretty faint. But in infrared, we're starting to discover these things, and we're discovering them very close. I haven't checked the last time, but I want to say that there's a pair of brown dwarf stars that are not closer than Alpha Centauri, but closer than Barnard's star, which would be the next star out. Barnard's star is also a red star, very dim, very hard to find. The reason Barnard's star was even discovered, only reason people paid attention to Barnard's star was because Barnard's star has the, at least for most of us, telescopic astronomy, Barnard's star has the highest apparent motion across the sky because it's close. And otherwise, we wouldn't have paid any attention to it. But it's moving relative to the other stars very quickly, and Barnard's star has traditionally been considered the second closest star system after the Alpha Centauri system. Yes, it's not lost on me. When you use the real star map, and the colonies is based on the actual stellar neighborhood out to about 30 light years or so. Most of the stars are red dwarfs, which means that they are not only so all the heavy the universe is made out of hydrogen, and then hydrogen would fuse in the very first stars and fuse into helium, and then these stars would explode out into space, they go nova, and then the gases would reform, and then after a while, all of the heavy elements are created by fusion in the hearts of stars. So first generations of stars had nothing but hydrogen and helium, but in the process of burning, of fusing the stuff together, they fused heavy elements like iron and calcium and all the rest of it. So we are genuinely, absolutely, there's no, indisputably made out of everything that we are, and everything around us is created in the center of a star that exploded billions of years ago. As a general rule, the larger the star is, the bluer it is, the more massive it is, and the hotter it is. So red dwarf stars are low mass. They have relatively low surface temperatures, and because they're consuming their fuel at such a small rate, they have a very, very long lifespan. And that's most stars. That's what makes the Hubble Space Telescope so interesting, because it's a near-infrared telescope, and it can see these stars in a way that Hubble couldn't see. So our star is in order of high temperature, high mass, short life, blue color. That's how it works. So the biggest, hottest, brightest stars are the bluest stars, and they burn through their fuel faster. And the least dense, coolest, longest lived stars are the red stars at the other end of the main sequence spectrum. So the star types are in order of blueness, brightness, and longevity. From blue to red, they are O, B, G, O, B, F, G, O, B, F, G, K, and M. We're G, K is Alpha Centauri B, and M is Alpha Centauri C. O, B, J, O, B, J, O, B, A, F, G, K, M, which is remembered by the famous astronomical mnemonic, "Oh, be a fine girl, kiss me." When you get into years in astronomy, you realize that they've added other divisions, which would make it W, O, B, A, F, G, K, N, R, N, S. And you can remember that because it goes from being, "Oh, be a fine girl, kiss me," to, "Wow, oh, be a fine girl, kiss me right now or soon," something like that. Anyway, so the sun is on the rarer side. We're brighter than average. We've got more metals than average, just because most stars are red and are very low density, very light, and essentially, as he points out, pretty worthless in terms of real estate. It's not that there won't be planets there. It's just that the planets will be, mostly silicates and not have an awful lot of usable resources, and also not likely to be dense enough to have a significant gravitational field, which means no atmosphere, or no magnetic core. No iron core means no magnetic field. That means no protection from solar radiation, which means no life and all the rest. So the prizes out there are possibly the Ks, the G stars like ours, definitely, and then the F stars, which are hotter than our sun. Once you get much hotter than that, then you start to get into lots of problems with ultraviolet radiation and too many high energy particles and all the rest of it. So the G stars are the goals. And when I did the colonies, I spent hours and hours and hours and hours and hours looking at the local group of stars and trying to figure out, number one, which ones were the most valuable, and number two, what would these trade lines look like? If you're going to build Stargate lines between them, it looks like a railroad thing, but you got to do it in 3 dimensions. It's a little trickier than it looks. And what I found was, if you go out to about 30 light years, there's a fairly consistent arm that's 4 or 5 light years per star. Then there's a pretty good long distance that I want to say is 8 or 9 light years. And then there's another one that's about 6. But once you make that one, then you can jump into a little cluster of 6 stars that are separated by 1 or 2 light years, so they're pretty close together. That's the colonies right there. That little mini cluster. That's, after much searching, that's the jewel of near space. That's where there are most likely good planets in a relatively close space. In fact, compared to our nearest neighbors, half the distance, a third of the distance, maybe even a quarter of the distance to the nearest star from each other. What's a good start viewing program, Bill? Are you talking about for astronomy there, Kellen? What's a good star viewing program? I got started with a book called A Field Guide to the Stars and Planets by Donald Menzel. It's about this big. It's a field guide. You take it outside. It was written in the 50s. And I love that book. I bought a couple versions of it off of eBay. I can answer your question. There's on Steam, there's a program called Star Engine, and it's fantastic. It's not a game exactly, and it's not even a simulation really. Star Engine is how I found all of those star systems. Star Engine is spectacular. When you download Star Engine, you also have the ability to download, I'm pretty sure for the same price, and it's not expensive at all. It's really reasonable. But when you download Star Engine, you can also download high resolution versions of the planets, which is worth it if you can do it. But the nice thing about Star Engine is it's got hundreds and hundreds of thousands of stars in the real world stars in the right place. And you can click on any one of them, and you can go there, and the stars will just start to shift, and that's cool. But the other thing that Star Engine does that is super cool, and why Star Engine is going to be an integral part of the colonies, is that Star Engine takes a look at what we know about exoplanets. And when I started in astronomy, there was potentially one or possibly two planets around Barnard's star, unconfirmed, stayed unconfirmed forever. Then they finally confirmed the first exoplanet, and then the floodgates just opened, and now there are tens of thousands of them that are confirmed. So what Star Engine does is, anytime there's an actual exoplanet that's been discovered, it'll update the database and put it where it's supposed to be. But more importantly, Star Engine uses a pretty sophisticated algorithm to estimate what the likelihood of planets would be based on what we know. So you can turn on Star Engine, turn on actual stars only, and then turn on procedurally generated planets, and it will populate every one of those hundreds of thousands of stars with the most likely planetary system that you would find. It's simply a guess, but it's a very, very good guess. In fact, there's a whole subgroup of people out there, because all of these things are procedural, and because the software is using the same procedure all across the number of users, there are people out there that do nothing but explore the hundreds of thousands, or you can add additional real-world stars and get into the millions. There are people that do nothing but explore these star systems, trying to find the most Earth-like planets that they can. There's a Star Engine Reddit group, and what you'll see on that group is you'll see a screenshot, and somebody said, "I found a Type G star with a 98% similarity to Earth. It's got all these organic compounds. Here's a picture of it." And everybody goes, "Oh, wow." And then below that, there'll be like GS 7492467883924700094-A. And if you write the stuff down and you punch that into the Star Engine thing, it'll take you there, and you'll see the exact same thing that they do. The cool thing about Star Engine is that because it's all open source and procedural, I can add things to it. In fact, if you go to Stratosphere Studios on YouTube, you'll see two videos I did with Star Engine. Stratosphere Studios has its own YouTube channel. Just look for Stratosphere Studios channel. There's two episodes I did that were specifically about Star Engine. It's absolutely fantastic. I really love it. Yeah, I hope you like it. I loved it. And by the way, small thing but important. The music, they've got kind of space music, but it's all original music, and the music is just so good. It really just takes you there. And by the way, in Star Engine, you can land any one of these procedurally. There are millions. Well, there are billions of procedurally generated moonlets, asteroids, and things like that. Jupiter alone has something like 80 moons now. Star Engine has every single one of them in its correct orbit, and you can land on every single one of them. They're procedurally generated. The bigger moons aren't. Those are like Io and Callisto, especially if you download the high res versions. But you can just fly anywhere. You can see something you like and just land on its surface. The surface graphics are not great, but they're okay. The beautiful thing about the surface graphics are that they're astronomically correct. So as I point out in one of these episodes, I'll use Star Engine to show me what the relative position of the sun would be, how high should it be, how big should it be, and what other planets in the system at any given time are bright enough to be seen by daylight and stuff. And then once I've got those things, then I can go into Blender or or Unreal and make a prettier version of them. But the Star Engine will get the science right. And that's a big part of it. And I haven't been able to talk about Star Engine for a long time because I've been so much stuff to do to push the colonies back. But Star Engine is one of the most exciting things about that. And anyway, as I said, because Star Engine is procedural, the colonies will have planets will have planets that will be procedurally generated, and then I will custom generate some where I need them for story purposes. But there's a single file that will write all of this stuff. We'll make that file available at the colony's website, and you will be able to take that, it's just a text file, load it into Star Engine, and then when you navigate Star Engine, you will see all of the planets, including the correct names of the planets, where they're supposed to be, and you can fly around the colony's universe in Star Engine. We have I have the artistic luxury to change the solar systems. I change them as little as possible, but if I think it really needs a goose or needs something here, I'll put something in there. But the great thing is, with the ability to download this simple text file and just drop it into a folder, your version of Star Engine and everybody else's version of Star Engine who's a fan of the colonies will show the exact same planets. They'll all look the same. They'll be the same size. They'll be procedurally generated the same way. The name tags will be the same. And that commonality is cool because once we get this thing up and going, we're talking about hundreds of planets and thousands of moons. And I want to outsource the lore on those. I just want to have somebody sign up and say, hey, we'd like to take this system. And I say, okay, off you go. And the two rules being, I can't pay you for it. I can get you a credit for it, but I can't, on-screen credit for it, but I can't pay you for it. And the other thing is, whatever you do is going to have to, it's going to have to get past my filter. Meaning if you've decided to, name a planet, Bert and Ernie World, you'd better have a good reason for why you did. And if you have a good reason for why you did, then I'm completely on board. All right, I'm going home. I'm not going home. Who am I kidding? But I'm really hungry and I'm getting a little tired. So I'm going to wrap this baby up. It's a 3-hour show. A real quick 3-hour show. Another 3-hour tour. By the way, there's a series of YouTube shorts that are running now, and it sounds exactly like David Attenborough's voice, although I don't think he's still with us. Thank you very much for that. Brick is very kind of you. But the same voice that did Band of Brothers narration and the Civil War narration, there's a series of YouTube shorts on World War II veterans. Many of them are unknown, and some of them were famous. And I didn't know this. I don't know if you knew this. But Russell Johnson, who played the professor on Gilligan's Island, many people know that Eddie Albert was a genuine war hero at Tarawa, saved 70 guys at Tarawa. Russell Johnson, who played the professor on Gilligan's Island, flew 44 missions in the Pacific as a navigator on board a B-25. His last mission, they sent him in to attack a Japanese harbor at 500 feet. His plane was shot to hell. The co-pilot was killed. They ditched in the ocean. And Russell Johnson went in the water and had to tread water for 12 hours before he was rescued. He flew 44 combat missions in the Pacific in a B-25 as a navigator. And I always loved the professor. I always just loved him. He was always just, to me, not just my favorite character on the show, but I just loved him. And when I found out that Russell Johnson was a war hero, I don't know, I think he might have rescued some of his guys, but in any event, 44 missions, shot down, treading water for 12 hours. And I remember thinking, my first thought was, man, if I'd been shot down in the Pacific and I'd had to tread water for 12 hours, you couldn't get me on an island in the Pacific for a TV show. You just couldn't. I just would not be going back there. But of course, Gilligan's Island was shot, I don't know, 6, 7 miles down the road there at Universal Studios. The Gilligan's Island Cove is still there. That little cove is still there, and it looks exactly the same. And I was like, holy crap, that's Gilligan's Island. And by the way, when I was doing the graphic for Archives Island on the website, I went to get the Gilligan's Island, and it turns out there were 2 different islands. The black and white island in the first season, when the opening theme song is the movie star and the rest. First season episode doesn't mention the professor or Marianne. That island is much smaller, and then when they went for the later seasons in color, they used a bigger island because I guess they realized, the professors built freaking cars run on, coconut husks and things like that. But just as a small little story to close this entertainment episode of the entertainment show, the first season of Gilligan's Island had the Gilligan's Island theme, with Gilligan, the skipper, to the millionaire and his wife, the movie star, and the rest. That's because they signed Russell Johnson and Don Wells late, and they weren't mentioned. And there was a big stink about it. Not so much among Russell Johnson and Don Wells, just among the rest of the cast members. There's 7 of us on the island. This isn't fair. And the rest, I mean, it's not like there's 30 others. And they said, we really would like you to change the theme song. And Sherwood Schwartz said no. And Bob Denver said, if you don't add them to the theme song, I'm going to use my contractual ability to put my credit wherever I want it, and I will put my credit last on the Gilligan's Island theme song. So you can do the movie star and the rest, and Gilligan, all, and Bob Denver did that, and he stuck to his guns on it and forced him to put it in there, which I thought was really, really cool. Really, 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 really cool. And the rest. I've seen Gilligan's Island hundreds of times before I saw one of the black and white episodes, and when they said, and the rest, that's kind of cheap. Even so, they still have to share they're the only 2. Yes, they're the only 2 that share a screen, because Natalie Schaefer gets her own screen, doesn't she? Yes. The Professor and Marianne. How hard was it, guys? Big deal? No. Do the right thing. Don't be a dick. I love stories like that where people stick up for people. Keanu Reeves famously, Keanu Reeves, by all accounts, is about the most decent human person in Hollywood. He rides the subway in New York City, and he made a lot of money on The Matrix, and he went to the special effects house where they did the special effects, and he gave them some significant amount of money, like $10 million or something. He basically, of his salary, he just basically said, listen, this movie, I was nothing in this movie. You guys made me into this superhero. You were working for scale or just barely scale. And I just wanted to thank you for moving me into this stratosphere of earnings. And he gave them like $10 million to split among the special effects guys. I'm not saying that this is the thing. If somebody forced him to do that, that wouldn't be virtue. But the fact that he did do it is, I thought, pretty cool. You won't ever find Keanu Reeves doing drugs because he doesn't have a personality that he has to hide from. That's my opinion. All right. Well, this show, as you may know, is made possible by the Gilligans over at BillWhittle.com, who have been with us through thick and thin. Who it's always such a pleasure to thank at the end of all of these shows. So again, thank you very much for our members here for making this possible. And at this time, we're going to say goodbye to our YouTube friends. So YouTube friends, goodbye. And we'll see you Thursday for Stratosphere Lounge. Thanks for being with us.